Hi, I'm Rachel Dillon, and together with my husband Marcus Dillon, we lead Who's Really the Boss podcast, where we highlight the joys and challenges of running a business with your spouse or family. Our mission is to strengthen families and businesses by helping listeners avoid the mistakes we have made so they can lead and live happily ever after. Welcome back to Who's Really the Boss podcast.
Hey, thanks for having me back.
All right, today we're talking all about expectations. So, would you say that you have realistic expectations or idealistic expectations?
Depends on the situation. So, probably most unrealistic when it comes to things, especially on things that you stew over in your mind, become unrealistic whenever they actually happen.
Yeah, I like to think that I'm a realist, but my expectations are, I feel like, kind of off the charts in many areas. I have this picture in my mind of how things should be, and when they're not that way, it really throws me for a loop. So,
yeah, the best service providers set a low bar, and under promise and over deliver whenever you can. That's not every relationship, unfortunately, but it's one where if you can do that in different areas of life, you probably be better for it.
Yeah, so talking through expectations, because I think mismanaged expectations or unrealized expectations are the source of most people's frustration.
Yeah, it's just mismanaged and miscommunicated, where the timeline or the results, like I said, if you got too much in your head and are just thinking about something constantly, it's just not going to be good.
Yeah, and something that's super common are like weight loss expectations, because you see it on magazines, on TV, on social media, 20 days, and these dramatic results, or you do this, take one pill and dramatic results. And so you have this idea or this expectation in your head that, well, if it worked for them, that it's going to work for me. And so I think on that, you have to decide what you're going to believe and who is going to bring that back to reality for you.
Yeah. Weight loss is a great kind of not option, but just thought along that same vein. Weight loss, but also building muscle. That's the other one where get fit and because weight loss isn't necessarily building muscle. And I think you see the person with the abs and the muscles and the vascular, and knowing what we know now, that can't happen in a matter of days, weeks, months, years sometimes.
And I think that picture you're describing is what people think when they say, I want to lose 10 pounds. They think that these muscles are going to blow up from I don't know where, and that's the aesthetic that they're going to achieve. But it's really having somebody who can come in and share how it's really going to go and set a better expectation. Yes, that's definitely communication in there. And who's, taking responsibility for communicating what's really going to happen, so that you have the right expectations for the long-term result.
Well, I think it's communication, but it's also experience. So I think experience is valuable to set the right expectation for those situations. And obviously in different aspects where you're building up a desired result in your mind and the expectation can be miscommunicated or misaligned with the path to get to that result, having the experience or idea of what that really takes to get to that end result is valuable.
Yeah. So let's take it into the business owner scenario. So some of the areas that business ownership, there's a lot of expectations or a lot of thoughts that people have going into it that they start to learn real quickly or start to get frustrated, upset, feelings of failure, that it's not working right, this isn't going the way I thought it would go. What are some areas that business owners that we talk with, or even just ourselves, where those expectations are wrong from the beginning?
So if I had to summarize it with one word, it would be resources. And I think you go back to financial resources, and I think you go back to time resources as kind of both of those areas. Financial resources, I'm going to start my own business, and out of the gate, all I'm going to do is go to the bank and make deposits. That's what everybody hopes, and what they're sold potentially by others. That is false. And behind every business owner making a trip to the bank or making a mobile deposit, there's a ton of work that goes into that. And so cash flow is so precious to small businesses. And that's where it's like you have to build up that momentum, build up through different things, whether it's discipline or a variety of different things, to kind of get to that point where it is a reality and it's not a misaligned expectation or anything like that. The other is time. So a lot of people think that, hey, I'm going to go into business for myself and just work less, and I'll work half days. And yeah, that's true, but you pick which 12 hours out of 24 you want to work. So I think the two main ones that we see are financial and time resources that are precious in all aspects of life, but can be misaligned from the very beginning.
I think some that have been recent for us, even being business owners for over a decade, that have come up are how quickly a new team member is going to be able to not just assimilate into our culture, but also to be able to be independent and gain efficiencies within their role.
Yeah, and you go back to experience. So because now we've got over a decade of experience with us, but then all the years of experience that we're able to see across peers, mentors, clients, and take that knowledge and apply it to ourselves. All of that experience, we know now we have to stick to a timeline, those time resources. And we know that within the first month, what that month needs to look like. And it's going to be you shadow me and watch me do it. The second month, I'm going to shadow you, watch you do it. And then the third month is independent play. Mm-hmm. And if they do not get it by the end of month 3 within that 90 days, that is not a fit. And every time we personally have extended that timeline, it's come back to bite us. And it won't bite us within the next week or month. It comes back like a year after the fact. And it's because we didn't set the right expectations, didn't do the right training, didn't fill in the right gaps from the very beginning. And we set that person up for failure.
Yeah. And I know that this was even a transition or a learning curve for us, because we had to learn from being in office in person physically together and hiring new team members, training new team members, to what that looks like being fully remote, to hiring remotely and training 100% remotely. And what did that timeline look like? And what we've found is that's where that 3 months is. So for us, with that remote training, that 3 months is really where we have to kind of draw the line and say, yes, this is a fit, or no, this isn't a fit. What we also know is at 90 days, they're not perfect. They don't know every single thing about every single one of our clients or every piece of technology that we use, but they know enough. They've internalized the value system that we have, and they know how to get answers to questions, or they know how to use resources to find answers for clients, whatever it might be. It's the ones who can't get to that point that we see a bigger problem. I think realistic expectation still closer to 6 months for someone to be to start building their own efficiencies within their role.
Yeah, you have to look at the cyclical nature of your business as well. So if the one that we kind of defaulted to are the people that we hire the most, which are CSMs, bookkeepers, accountants that are doing things on a monthly basis. So that monthly cadence makes sense because you have 3 closeouts and 3 opportunities to do the 2 different shadows and then the independent. If you are another role, let's say a client CFO, maybe you're only doing a quarterly, like you just have to align those expectations based on the role. And maybe you've only got annual projects. So it takes a while to really gain comfort. I would say no matter what the cadence of your business is, you have to align those expectations the right way from the beginning. And based off your experience or the experience of others, use that in sticking to that timeline that you've set.
Yeah. Another area which I think we tried to base that same timeline off of was new clients, assimilating to our processes, onboarding, and just becoming, from a business owner perspective, becoming a profitable engagement. And so talk a little bit about what that looks like, that we found is not the same timeline as a new team member.
So yeah, that's a tricky one. So with taking things, you have to have data to build off of. So with that, you have to look at everything that you're doing for that client relationship and what fits within the scope that you've been engaged to do. Or if things are outside of that scope, do you have the skill set and the desire to continue doing those things for that client? So identify that first. That's based on actual data with what you're doing. Second is the conversation to actually increase scope if you do want to continue. If you don't want to continue and you don't feel you have the skill set to, you need to make a referral or something else, like have a bigger conversation with that client, because that could come back to bite you. And ultimately, if you're not the best equipped person or team to do that, you need to do that sooner rather than later after you've identified it. So being unprofitable, that should just allow you to identify where gaps are or where things aren't working well. And the action you take as a leader is really those second steps to actually make an improvement, both in profitability of it by increasing scope or no longer doing those services. Mm-hmm. And increasing scope could just be a price increase. And so those are the other pieces to kind of keep in mind.
Yeah. And I know for us, a new client, after we're engaged, then implementation starts. So onboarding starts. So that first month, we actually do charge an implementation fee because there is a lot. Anybody who's ever onboarded a new client in any industry, but definitely in accounting, for bookkeeping, payroll, sales tax, tax returns, advisory, there's a lot that goes into learning the history of that client and setting up better processes, reviewing prior information, prior year tax return to make sure that it was optimized, that all opportunities were taken advantage of. So we know that first month is doing a lot of digging and setting up new rules, setting up new processes. The second month is really carrying out the function that our team does. So almost like trial and error, or test the process. The third month we're refining. So it's like, okay, we know in the first 3 months there's going to be more time spent for that new client. And then by that fourth month, we need to start really seeing about that price. Did we price it correctly? And I would say most of the time, yes. And so that's good. But then we need to start looking for efficiencies, or where can we make the client experience better? Where can we bring more value? Like, where are we bringing value to this client? And that's really, by month 4, we got to bring it.
Well, and during that first 90 days of that client relationship, because you know of all of those things you listed, that the additional time and value that's going to be added to that client relationship, and then that first 90 days, you charge for it. Like that is an investment to become a client and to get served by our team. So all of that kind of has to make sense with the scope and the value you bring to the client, because we were at a point where we were not charging for onboarding. We were not kind of having this kickoff engagement, and we were losing enough. Like we didn't need any new clients because we were losing so much money on them that we would never make that back in opportunity cost to serve other people within our own business already. And so that's where you kind of keep coming back to, does it make sense? And if it doesn't, address the issue.
Yeah. So what are some expectations that people should have? And again, staying along the lines of business. Everybody wants to grow. Most people want to grow a business. They start a business to grow it. They have some revenue marks in mind, and human nature, we just want to get there as fast as possible. So what are some realistic expectations people should have with wanting to grow super fast at the fastest rate possible?
It can be done, but what's your pain tolerance? Mm-hmm. And so that amount of growth, if you're looking to double your revenue and team and business size year over year, are you ready for that ride and everything that comes along with it, as far as the stress, the hours that go into that, the investment from a capital perspective? Because as you grow a team, the revenue doesn't show up in the same time frame that the payroll does. And I think those are all the pieces that you have to go into that season prepared and ready. You have to align your expectations to what that life really looks like. And so if you are just looking for a more gradual pace of growth, let's say 15 to 20% per year, as opposed to 100% of growth per year, that can be a little bit easier to digest and not as big of a cash flow outlay for the future.
Yeah. And something that we have firsthand experience with, we definitely have experience with growth and growing fast. We merged in a firm and grew overnight. That's how we know. We have the experience of the pain that came with that we didn't necessarily plan for. We planned for the how can we not be better together. We didn't plan for some of the harder parts of that, which was having a bigger team, bringing two cultures together that were completely different, bringing two cultures of clients together and assimilating one that was used to doing things very physically, like in person, still highly relational, but everything physical paper, in-person meetings, just a lot of face-to-face time to a very much digital, paperless environment. And it was hard. It was hard for the clients. It was hard for the team. It was hard for us. And so it was very different. So we definitely have experience with that. But I think something else that we have a lot of experience with is transforming our firm from that big high volume of clients, high volume of team members, to more of, I guess what you call it, like a lifestyle firm, that then we gradually grew back to what we once had.
Yeah, and that was all of these growth trajectories are individual choices. And so I think given the season of life that we were in, we made the decisions that we made. Those may be different for other people given the season of life that they're in or what they are building. If they are building something with the intention to sell in a certain amount of time and they have a shorter runway. But for us, it was the balance of growth and lifestyle. So the main points with aligning expectations there that you also have to speak into, or the team and the clients that you did mention, is the expectations matching their experience. And then there's not a disconnect in those as well, because if expectations are only in the owner's mind and something else is happening internally with the team or externally with the clients, like that's also misalignment that needs to be addressed.
Yeah. So we transformed our kind of high volume, annual only touch points of tax returns firm into a high value, highly relational monthly touch points or more. Some are like every week that we're interacting with a lot of our clients. Every week we interact with them in some form. And so what are some of the expectations, realistic, from our experience, realistic expectations that, say, another accounting firm owner should have if they want to take it from that annual revenue with the annual engagements that are probably more compliance related to the advisory services?
Yeah, some expectations are that you have to communicate and feel like you are over communicating with those clients and team members. Annual, that once a year touch point, once a year engagement, you can kind of fall back to the, hey, we'll get you out in 2 to 3 weeks. We'll return your call later this week. When someone's spending money with your office once a month, you can't do that. And especially if you're doing things like payroll and helping guide their leadership team on financial decisions, time is of the essence on a lot of that. And so the more timely financial data and financial conversations you have with a client, that's where you bring the value. That's where value matches the price you charge, essentially. And that availability is what people pay for in today's world. So I think managing those expectations of what value you're bringing to the relationship, that is completely different on a monthly basis than a once a year annual volume relationship. The piece on the volume relationship as well, what we've come to learn is you can have a bad client or a bad fit or a bad fee and recover from it, no problem. But if you have a bad client, a bad price structure, a bad fit in a monthly relationship, you need to address it like sooner rather than later, because the team structure is just, it's not designed for that. And you don't want to keep losing money on an engagement that you priced the wrong way, or the scope was so out of alignment that you just didn't know that whenever they were a prospect. And those are some of the pieces that I would encourage people to look for if they are transitioning from annual relationships to monthly, is make sure that you priced it the right way, make sure that your touch points are scheduled and not reactive, and make sure that you have the right team equipped, because a team will just have more availability for touch points than one person. And so if you're employing a team and delegating things, you're able to multiply touch points that much better.
What can people expect from, a lot of times the reason to move from the high volume annual projects that are deadline driven to a more advisory service is hours worked? What should the expectation be, say, year 1 of the transition to like year 5 of the transition? What's kind of the continuum that people could expect from hours worked?
Yeah, hours worked first year, when you're making that transition, you're probably going to work more. You're going to have more inputs than you are, outputs, essentially. So how you modify that based on the structure of your team from year 1 to year 5 is based on what you like, how fast you want to evolve. And if you are able to evolve faster, at a pace that's faster than others, then by year 5, it will be drastically different as far as time inputs. But you're likely, with any implementation project, regardless if it's technology, team structure, new clients, you're always going to spend more time on the front end and invest in that relationship with the client, invest in processes and putting the right things in place, the building blocks for long-term success. And you're going to see returns probably mid-year 2, and through year 5, it's really going to be running really, really smooth. The useful life of a client is about 7 years in an accounting firm. And so just keep that in mind as well. And so if you're trying to get the best return on investment possible over those 7 years, you want to heavily weigh that toward the front end. And the way that you do that is build up a team to do the right amount of onboardings at the right time and structure that onboarding cycle so it's constant versus just all in at one time and there's a bottleneck.
So definitely for us, by year 2 and year 3, we definitely saw a drop off in hours worked from our team, but not necessarily year 1. And that didn't mean that it doesn't work or it's failing. It just meant that we didn't want to completely scrap our business and start over. We wanted to slowly transition. So we transitioned clients that were no longer a fit at a slow pace, at a manageable pace, which brings to the next point, expectations of revenue.
Yeah.
What can people expect, again, like a year 1 to 5 as they're transitioning from a revenue perspective when going from a lot of tax work to, or even maybe audit work to full advisory.
Yeah. So year 1, during the transition, unless you're able to like sell your firm and just build a new one, like you're going to have some of those annual clients will spill over into as you're building out the monthly. And that's where you really have to get your hands around the time, because for a while, for a season, you're serving both in 2 different service models. And as you continue to transition, hopefully by year 2 or 3, you're just doing less annual clients, less annual touch points. So the culling has to begin before year 1. If you're able to monetize anything, whether it's whole firm or portion of the firm, then that block that you've monetized is essentially the gap in profit for year 1. So your top line revenue will likely decrease because you've exited or sold off clients to make room for capacity for the new service line you want to embrace. So top line revenue will decrease, but hopefully cash flow is there if you've monetized a client block, and profit could be there too, because let's say you monetize a $100,000 block of clients, that $100,000 goes to the bottom line as no expense really going to those, and is there as cash flow to give you runway to keep people employed, assuming you have a team and are trying to keep people employed or go find new people. So those are the pieces that we did. You block clients, you monetize, you do a little bit at a time. Some have asked me, would you have just, looking back, would you have sold the whole thing and then rebuilt? And I can't say that would have been the right call either, because I learned so much during those transitions that shaped where we're at today, and we survived. So it's one of those where I can't say that I'd go back either.
And starting anything from scratch is pretty difficult and definitely time intensive. And at least the time that we were spending in the business, we had already been spending that time. So we already knew that versus going out and starting and, not knowing what was around the corner. You kind of had a little bit of insight. Yeah. Any other areas of transitioning or transforming a firm, any other areas of expectations that maybe cause some people to stop or quit or never start because they don't quite fully understand the time or the effort maybe that it'll take to move from that one service line to another? Yeah,
and the need to transition, that really needs to be evident. So don't transition your firm just because others are telling you to, and because it's necessary, or others are telling you that you have a problem that you don't feel any pain in. If your business is operating fine, there may not be a reason to go through the pain of a transition. There will be pain in transition. You may be okay with the firm as it operates today, and if that's okay, just continue to do what you're doing. But most people are wanting to embrace a brighter future, fewer hours, steady cash flow, stable team. And as part of that, you've got to really go through some pain to make it evident that a better future is worth changing. And the pain of staying the same is what could be holding you back, which we've talked about before. So that would really be my only thing. Like, don't go into it unless you're really prepared to invest and make the moves. Mapping it out with others who have done it before is extremely valuable. And that way, you know that your expectations going into it are kind of aligned with the timeline and results and things like that. And you can make small tweaks along the way if you aren't seeing those results like you should, or if it's just taking longer. And I think that's the other piece, where just be okay with the process and realize that it is about the journey and not necessarily the destination and all of that. And you'll be fine.
Yeah. Well, this has been a good conversation. I think that there was a lot of wisdom shared, a lot of experience, at least from our perspective, and we're just one firm that has done it. And so hopefully this was helpful to somebody listening.
Yeah, thanks for leading it.
Thanks for hanging with us to the end of another episode. Leave us a review with your thoughts, comments, and feedback on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Be sure to subscribe to our podcast so you don't miss any future episodes. Join us again next week for another great conversation.